So there's one mistake that I see beginners make all the time, and that is they overcomplicate their images. So in this video, I'm going to show how you can create simple compositions with these easy tips.
A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So I've got a really exciting topic to talk about. It doesn't sound exciting, but it's all about simplicity. But there's so many things that you can do to make a photo simpler. So you can create images like this or like this, where it just is really simple. But the thing is that what I find is when I'm judging lots of compositions, which I do, I see a lot of photos that people send in to me. The big mistake that most people make is that they overcomplicate the images. So I want to go through 7 tips that you can do really easily when you're out in the field to create simpler images. So we'll start with the first one, which is just the color palette and just minimizing the color palette. So I've been doing a project called Gold and Black. This is one of the images that I just showed you, but there's many other images like these here where I've just used the golden sun mostly and the dark landscape, quite often in winter when perhaps the color palette isn't as strong. And what it means is that you can just simplify the photo by just using this reduced color palette. So when you're out, just think how many colors are in your image, because what you've got to remember with landscape photography is there's lots of elements. There's all the textures, there's the shapes, there's the light interacting with the land. And if you have too many things going on, then you lose the main subject. You lose the sort of point of the image, I suppose. But reducing the color palette is one really good way to do it. So in this image here, you can see with the light backlighting these trees and creating silhouettes, then you can see that it's a lot simpler than it would be if that was just a flat landscape with lots more color in it. I think everything will get very lost and it look quite complicated. And this image here from the Faroe Islands, I just used blue tones in it. And I'll talk about this image later because one of the other tips I talk about is about breathing room, and I'll get onto that soon. So the next one is zoom, zoom, zoom. This sounds obvious, but if you're going to simplify a landscape, then it's best to zoom in on an element. And there's so many times when I'm out running workshops where people have the wide angle lens on, they want to try and get a wide angle shot, but they won't have any foreground. And if you have your wide angle lens without any foreground, all you're doing is including lots of the landscape. And that can be quite difficult to get a really compelling image. It's much better to zoom in. So if you take this example here, this was on the top of Langdale Fell in the Lake District, and we had this amazing scene. You can see Mass doing one of his poses. But in this actual scene, I showed this in a video not too long ago as well, there's lots of really much more compelling shots than Mass on the end of this on the end of this headland here than that wide angle shot. And just by putting a 70 to 200 or a 70 or 100 to 400 lens on and zooming in on the aspects of the landscape, you can simplify it, you can reduce the clutter and really focus in on things like the trees just peeking out of the fog in this case. The other one in last Sunday's video was this shot that I showed, but I took a wider shot as well, and you can see it here. And this wider shot has got a bit of foreground in, and it sort of works, but it's a little bit complicated. There's a lot going on in it. But as soon as I put a zoom lens on, it's 24 to 120 in this case, and zoomed in on the reflection of the trees, it just makes it much simpler and much more compelling. And again, this one in Greenland, it's so hard. When you're in Greenland with all these icebergs, so much is going on. I always say it's a bit like doing woodland photography. And I saw this scene here, I was trying to compose it. I couldn't get anything really compelling, but then I just put my long lens on, focused on this little gap between the icebergs here, and I got the birds in there, and it's much simpler. I've really reduced the clutter in the scene, and that makes a really big difference. So just take your long lens or put your long lens on. It'll definitely help create simpler images. Okay, the next one to create simple images is just reducing competing elements. So again, this is often just done by moving your feet or zooming in or just moving your camera. But this is a good example again. This was River Brathay in the Lake District. And I got a nice shot here. I actually quite like this shot, but there's a lot going on. It took quite a long time to compose, and I feel like these reeds at the bottom are a little bit distracting. Much better shot was when I walked forward a little bit, and I've got this shot that is of these trees with the reflection. This was taken about 8 years ago, I think, but it works so much better and it's so much simpler. And this one was in Iceland, so you can see the bottom of the image here is quite cluttered. I've got something that's sort of okay. We've got a bit of a leading line, but there's a lot of competing elements in this bottom element, this foreground element of the shot, and I'll go on to this as well because foregrounds are so important. And I feel like it's much better if you're struggling with foregrounds just to go for a very uniform foreground like I've done with the water coming in. So it's pretty much the same location. I've just walked forward to where the water's coming in and used that as a very simple foreground, and it massively helps. Okay, tip 4 is the obvious one. So tip 4 is all about just looking around and patrolling the edges and the border of your images. I see this so many times that people just don't think about the borders and end up with just things that are just a little bit distracting. So you can see here, this one's in the Lake District, and I've got this little bit of sun at the top of the image on the top left here, which is just distracting. Just by going a little bit closer, I've got rid of that. You can crop that afterwards if you want, if you've not got it right in the field, which often I do. I don't always get it right in the field. Or this one where I've included the sky, and actually it's much better just to get rid of the sky because that ridge line's a little bit distracting. So as soon as I get rid of that sky, you can see that there's just these 3 trees and it's just a simpler composition. And simple is always the best in landscape photography. I can guarantee if you look at your favorite images, you'll see this repetition of simplicity in the images. With woodland photography, that's where it's really important to think about the borders. So just often you'll have like a trunk just popping out, like this one here you can see in my local forest, where I've just got this trunk at the bottom right, and just by cropping in a little bit, you can remove that distraction. So I'd recommend that whenever you're taking your shot, before you click the shutter, just go around all the edges and think, if I move left, right, if I zoom in a little bit, will that make a difference? Because sometimes you can't crop it afterwards. Sometimes it might just mean that you move left a little bit or right a bit. Quite often tilting your camera can make a big difference as well. And think about those distractions. It might just be clouds, how you've clipped a cloud. It might be the ridge lines too close to the top. All those things make a big difference. Patrolling the edges is so important. So I just want to take a quick break here just to talk about my next book. My 5th book is going to be called Close to Calm, and it's all about my local area. Within 1 hour's drive of where I live, I've taken so many amazing shots over the last few years, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of woodland shots, but also other types of shots as well, where I've maybe flown my drone, but I've just kept it really close. And doing that's been really relaxing. It's really helped with my back problems. I've had a lot of mental health issues with my back problems, and it's been an amazing journey to create this collection of images. So I'm really excited about Close to Calm. And I'm going to be selling that book through my website. My website is built on Squarespace, who, guess what? Yeah, they're the sponsor of this week's video. If you haven't got a website, then as a photographer, I'd strongly recommend going to get one. And if you're looking to maybe sell a calendar or a book, then what better place to do that than a website? And Squarespace has got fantastic tools. It's a great platform to be able to build your own shop. And I've done that for years now. My book is going to be sold to many countries. The shipping is really easy to deal with, and different shipping prices within Squarespace, and allows me to send my books all over the world. I think the last book went to about 86 countries. So yeah, if you're looking to build your own website, go to squarespace.com/Nigel to get 10% off, or use offer code Nigel. And if you're interested in my book that's going to be released in the next month or 2, then it's going to be a very limited run, this book. It's going to be a real special book, and it's going to be a limited run. So if you want to get your name down and the first to hear about it, there's a link in the description. Check it out and sign up, and I'll send you guys the email first. Okay, on to the next tip. And this is probably what I think is the most important. If you're going to do any of these tips, think about this one. And this is the foreground should lead the eye in and not be a distraction. That bottom third of your image is so important. So if you look at this, then you know this bottom bit here, I never include a lot of distraction detail in the bottom parts of my image, or very rarely, especially the wider angle ones. I create it simple. I have repeating patterns. This is another good example here where I've just got this leading line in, but this bottom area is really simple. Quite often when I see people doing wide angle shots, they put a lot of clutter in here, and it's distracting, and your eye gets stuck because you tend to go up an image like this. You read sort of that way and that way. So I would really recommend doing that. If you've got repeating patterns like these two images here from Luskentire, then just think about that for that bottom half or bottom third of your image. You know, maybe the light's creating repeating patterns on how it's catching, maybe there's some leading lines created, but anything you can do to create it as simple as possible will massively help your images. I promise it will. And it could just be like bokeh balls like this one here, where, you know, another black and gold image where it's just super simple and repeating patterns. Again, if you're doing a woodland shot where you've maybe got something at the bottom third, again, just think how you can make that simpler. Just a little change in my position here made that bottom part of the image a lot simpler from this shot from Madeira. So if you think about that, whenever you're doing a wide angle shot, I guarantee it'll make a difference. Just think, look at the ground and just think, what is there that's leading line or a repeating pattern? The penultimate tip now, tip number 6, is the power of negative space. I probably use negative space quite a lot on here, or this bit here. It just means that it just gives it a lot of power, this image, a lot of breathing space. Breathing space is really important for simple images. This example here is good from Antarctica. I've got this penguin here. It's looking back, or it's walking across here, and it's got all this space in the top left side here. And I took a similar shot from this location, but I included the rock on the right hand side, and that's just not as powerful an image. If you compare these two shots side by side, you can see that the one with the penguin is just way more compelling, it's way more powerful. So less is more, and the way to do that is having a lot of breathing room. This iceberg's a really good example, this black and white shot here. I've just not gone too close on it, I've given it lots of breathing room, so it gives it that vastness. And again, going back to that shot I showed right at the very beginning from the Faroe Islands, that rock's got a lot of breathing room. If I zoomed in on that rock, it just wouldn't be as good. It'll just look like a rock, whereas at the moment you think, it questions it, you see all the clouds, you think, wow, what's that island, where is it? Because it's got all that space around it, and it's super simple. The final tip, which is something you can do if you're really struggling, is just focus on the details. So I struggled a lot when I was in Greenland and Antarctica over the last few years. I've photographed a lot of glaciers, a lot of icebergs, and it's so hard. But if you just focus in, again, zoom in a little bit, then those details often provide very interesting and very simple shapes that you can photograph. So I definitely recommend doing that. You might just want to photograph on the water, like this water. I think this was in Antarctica as well, and I just saw the ripples and I thought they were interesting. Or just going with sort of minimalism, like this shot here, where I've just focused on the reflection, the fog, and the sun coming through the fog. There's not a lot to the image, it's very simple, and I've just created a more abstract shot. So abstract shots are a good idea when you're struggling a little bit, I think, and you just want to focus on the detail, the texture, or the shapes that are within the landscape. And that's it. You know, it's super simple to create simple images, and I guarantee they'll make more powerful images. Good luck. Yeah, if you're interested in my book that's coming out, Close to Calm, then you can sign up below. Thanks for watching. Till a week on Sunday. Bye.